Hey everyone, it's Steve from the garden. In this video, I'm going to go over my potato planting. So that time has come where it's time for me to get my potatoes in the ground. So in this video, I'm going to go over everything from preparing the seed potatoes to preparing my container mix for the ones I'm going to grow in root pouches, to actually putting these potatoes in the root pouches and also in an in-ground bed. The seed potatoes I ordered in are three varieties. The first one is called Prada, which is a first early or early season potato. The second is a Kennebec, which is a mid-season or second early potato. And the last one is a German butterball. And the German butterball is a main crop, and that's the late season. Now I also have some potatoes that I saved from last year, and those are like a superior, which is also like a second early or mid-season. And there's a mix of some other stuff like some Rio Grande russets and a few other varieties, along with some Yukon Golds. There's some Yukon Golds in there too. So the first up here is a Kennebec. Now a Kennebec is like a white flesh potato. These are the little eyes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up these potatoes so that each chunk has, 1 to 2 eyes if possible, and that'll give me more potatoes to spread around. My goal is to have larger potatoes for harvest, and if you grow the larger potatoes in the ground, you tend to get more potatoes, but they'll probably be a little bit smaller. So I'd rather have fewer potatoes per plant, but have larger potatoes. For cutting these up, what I'm going to do is, I said I want to get like, say, 1 to 2 eyes per chunk. So I'm just going to look at them and say, okay, well, there's an eye here and an eye over here. There's one on this side, and there's some spots over here that I can get some eyes from too. So I'm just going to take my knife and I'm just going to cut that right in half, I think. So there I have a nice chunk. And on this piece, I can see I have an eye, and there's another one over here. So I'm going to cut that chunk up also. This potato is a bit smaller, but I got 2 eyes here, and I got 1 here. So I'm just going to cut this one like that. And that way, there's a little bit there for each one. Now I do need to leave these sit for maybe a couple days so that this part that I cut has a chance to kind of like scab over, and that way when I put them in the ground they don't rot and they don't get infected with anything. One more example. So I got two eyes here, 1 here, there's 1 over here. So I'm just going to cut that in half. There's like another eye right here. Cut them up like that. So even like a small chunk like this will produce, good sized potatoes. I could even cut this one up a little bit more because there's an eye here and there's 1 here. And this is roughly about the size I'm looking for, generally speaking. I got the first bag cut up. So when I get like these smaller ones like this, I'm just gonna leave these uncut because they're already a good size. And I'll put my bag that says, like, these are Kennebec, so I'll put the bag on the tray here, and then I'll put this over here on a shelf for a couple days. Next up is the Prada. This is the first early variety or early season. So I'm going to cut these up. And you can see that these are yellow flesh variety, so I'll make a nice addition to the white flesh variety of the Kennebec. I've not grown Prada before, so this is just a new one to me. So we'll just have to try it out, see how it is. The last one up is the German butterball. Now most of these are already a pretty good size for me. These are perfect right for planting. I'm going to take a couple of the larger ones and I'm going to cut them up. And these are also a yellow skin variety or yellow flesh variety. Now you might hear the term of potatoes being determinate or indeterminate. And it's really hard to find information on which variety is a determinate or indeterminate. And for the determinate varieties, they will produce all their potatoes just on like a single level. And then the indeterminates, as they grow up, they'll produce more potatoes on the way. The general rule you can follow is that the first and second earlies or early or mid-season potatoes, those are going to be your determinants. Your main crop potatoes, those are your indeterminates. I'm not saying that rule applies to every variety of potato that's out there, but just as a very general guideline, that should help you out. It's been several days since we cut up the potatoes, and so now they're all like skinned over on that cut part, and they are definitely ready for planting. The method I'm going to use for planting follows the Tony O'Neill method on simplified gardening, except Tony's got access to these 8-gallon pots that I just have not been able to find here in the States. But what I do have is I bought these 10-gallon root pouches, and I had commented with Tony about these root pouches, and he says, yeah, these should work. They're very close to what he's using for those buckets in terms of volume. I'm going to show you what I'm doing for a container mix. I am mixing my own because I actually have about 1.5 yards of material I need. So I have a pile of compost here, and I'm going to combine the compost with some peat moss and a little bit of vermiculite. For the actual mix, I'm going to add a couple of 5-gallon buckets of the compost. But first, I'm going to add 1 bucket of the compost, and then I'm going to add the peat moss in. Moss and the vermiculite. I got about half a bucket of peat moss and then maybe a quart's worth of vermiculite. I'll add that in, and I'll mix that together. My goal here is to create a container mix that is able to retain moisture but can also drain pretty freely, which is important with potatoes because you don't want them to rot within your container. For my first and second earlies, I'm going to fill the root pouch about 1/3 of the way up with soil or my potting mix. I'm going to add 1 handful of my organic fertilizer in here. Mix that up real well. And I'm going to take 2 of my seed potatoes and put them in at this level, making sure I get the eyes pointing up and paying attention to what direction I'm planting these ones. I'm going to add more container mix to go to the 2/3 level of filling this pouch. I'm going to add 1 more handful of balanced organic fertilizer. Mix that in. And I'll plant 2 more seed potatoes perpendicular to the first ones. Again, making sure the eyes are pointed up. With that done, I'll top off the rest of the bag. I'm leaving about 1 inch of headspace, so I have room to add some mulch to help retain moisture. And now that the bag is full, I will add like 1 more handful of the fertilizer in. Just kind of mix it up into the top. And as it gets watered or it rains, some of that nutrients will get worked down into the soil. For my main crop potatoes, one of the main differences between this and the first and second earlies is that these will produce potatoes all the way up, and I ran out of my root pouches, so I'm going to use my 17-gallon tubs instead. So I got this tub filled up 1/3 of the way with soil, or with my potting mix. So I'm going to add 2 handfuls of my balanced organic fertilizer. Mix that in real well. I'm going to do 4 potatoes in this container because it's about twice the size of the ones that Tony's using. So I'm going to just put each of these seed potatoes kind of like in a square pattern with the eyes pointing up. I will now fill it up about halfway up with the container mix. So that's about the halfway point. And I'll add 2 more handfuls of the fertilizer. Mix that in. And this bucket is ready. I'm going to leave this bucket half full, and I'll put it over my potato row. Once the vegetation starts growing through it, I'll let the vegetation get maybe like 2 or 3 inches tall. Then I'll add, another, 3 or 4 inches of potting soil. I'll keep repeating that process until the container is completely full. Once the container is all the way full, then I'll put mulch on top of that to hold the moisture in. Now for planting my in-ground potatoes, I'm going to use like a minimum dig method for putting the seed potatoes in the ground. I use a stick to mark where my row is going to be, and then I will dig down about 6 or 7 inches. Drop my seed potato in with the eyes up. Add a pinch of fertilizer to it. Cover that one up. Now move over, about 8 inches or so. Do another one. Get the eyes up. Pinch of fertilizer. Cover it up. Now if I do get like these little clumps, I break those up. But this bed should be pretty good overall. I use the same in-ground planting method for all the potatoes, regardless of whether it's a first early, second early, or main crop. Now the main difference for the main crop is that because those can produce tubers up near the surface, so I'll keep an eye on those, and if I start seeing them form tubers near the surface, then I start hilling them up at that point. Now for me, planting in ground is faster than filling up all those containers, but when it comes to harvest time, the containers are far easier to harvest from. In the last few years, when I've done comparisons for the in-ground versus the containers, the in-ground has outproduced the containers. But again, time-wise, the containers are much, much faster. Now, one big difference between this year and previous years in terms of my container growing is that this year I have those 10-gallon root pouches, which are not quite half the size of those 17-gallon tubs I was using previously. I'm hoping that the smaller size, in combination with being able to put them in a better spot in the garden in terms of overall sunlight, that this will be the year that the containers can outproduce the in-ground. Hope you enjoyed coming along on my potato planting today. I'm in a run for 500 subs, so if you like my videos and what you're seeing from me, maybe consider subscribing. Until next time, hope you got something out of this video, and have a good one.